Welcome back to part 3, CSC 200 for our EX7B SpongeBob database insert. And this is, again, part 3, the third video that we're going to start to be working on writing some PHP to actually make it display to the page. We got it to connect in our last video, so everything's connected to the server, connected to our database. Now we just have to write some code that actually takes the information, that pulls the information from our form and actually kind of displays it on the page, and that'll be the fun part to do. And some of this is done first, so it shouldn't be too bad. And we're going to just kind of look at some of these comments here to just see what we're supposed to do, because you know, it might have been a while since the last time you did this. But the first thing in here says create a variable insert SQL to represent the insert query when you're actually inserting the ID. It says ID city not needed. So like insert query, what is he talking about here? Now if we go into PHP, I'm actually gonna I'll open this thing up in a separate tab so I can keep my PHP. I'm gonna open this up in a new link here with my SQL, and just to give you a little refresher, this was actually the for SQL, because we were just doing SQL, this was actually the insert into. And if you remember how this worked, this is where we were kind of inserting into, and we used to start even with some of this, but this would be inserting into characters, and then we actually put the column, the column headings in here, and then we actually put the values in here. So this is what we're doing, except we're doing it through PHP. So we're actually doing it through a PHP, I guess a variable that's actually going to represent that. So that's what we're going to be doing next. So let's go and take a look at this again, and I'll go back to my display B, which here it is, and it says create a variable. So let's just create a variable. I'll tab over here, and for a variable we just do a $, and it says insert underscore SQL. So that's just a variable, and then whenever we do a variable we just do equal. So what does it represent? Well, it's going to represent basically our select query that actually puts it in there, that actually puts it in. And actually, let me look at some of these other ones. Did we do it in any of these others? Just to get a look of one that we did before. And again, we didn't do an insert, but we did. It's kind of like this, where we just do this kind of select kind of thing. It's basically taking that SQL query that we did, and it's just kind of, we're just representing it as something else, as a variable. So we're going to go back and do that. So we can go back and copy this right from here. We could do this insert into if we want to. We could just copy all this. I'll click on the try it yourself and do this, because that's how we did it when we did it in PHP-MyAdmin. And I'll copy this and we'll update it. And I don't need to keep it open. So I'm just going to go back to Adam, and I'll just put in that thing in here. Now remember, it has to go in quotes, so I'll just put quotes here, or maybe I'll even, I'll put quotes here. I think it could go in the double quotes, and we use an insert into, and I'll just start changing things right away. It's not going to be insert into customers, it's going to be characters, because we called them the SpongeBob characters. So it's going to be, that's our table name. So we're inserting into the table characters from our database, because we're already connected to the database. And then we don't have customer name. We have to look and see what we have here. We had things called last name, first name. So let's take a look at our database in MAMP. Let's just see what we have here in MAMP. We have last name, first name. So that's kind of the way we had it set up. So we could put in last name, first name, species, city, and gender. And or we could have them all kind of. We're only going to be inserting the last name, first name, species, and gender. We're not going to be inserting ID, and we're not going to be inserting city. So even though we have like 6 of these here, we're only going to be putting 4. So last name, first name, species, and gender. So that's what we're going to put in is exactly as they are there. So I'm going to go back here, and they should be like they are up here, just like this. I guess you could copy them in, or you could just make sure you type them okay. So I'll just, I have name here, so I could just use this, and I'll just put last name, even though when we enter them, we'll enter the first name first because it just feels more natural. And then I'll put last name, and I'll put first name, and we will not put in city, we will not put in address of what's over here, and we need species, so we'll put in species, and that had a capital S. And then the last one was gender, which we're going to put in an M or F. So we don't need ID and we don't need city. It's just going to automatically put that in there. So we don't have to put that in there when we're inserting. When we display them, we do want to display, we may want to display the ID and those things, but so for inserting, so what are we going to put in here for values? And now we're not putting in actual names. Remember, what we're putting in are whatever people enter into here. So we're actually going to put in these variables, because the variables are what people are going to put in there. So this is what they entered, and the variables are going to kind of represent that. So I could even, even if I wanted to, it might be easier to even copy these and put these all in here. Although they're going to need quotes and stuff like that, so they will need quotes in there. But I'm going to put a quote and then a $, and that should be last name, and then I'll put a quote after it. And then I'll put a quote and a $, and then a quote after it. And I'm pretty sure I used the quotes in here. And $. I'll put the $signs first. And then you can do this too. You can highlight and then just put a quote, and it'll put around both. So I can highlight gender and put a quote. And notice I'm using, if I use double quotes on the outside, I should use single quotes on the inside. So everything looks okay. These are kind of gray, but I think that's okay. I think that's the way it should look. And that's why, like I said, that's why I keep my finished one here. So if I'm not sure of how things look, yeah, that's how I did it there. So that looks okay. So just wanted to double check so I don't have to, I know it's nice to kind of troubleshoot things as we go, but I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm pretty sure I needed quotes in there, and the reason I do need quotes is because when you insert, you need quotes, whether you're putting the actual value in or whether you're putting in the variable. They want quotes. That's the way the SQL language works when it puts it in there. So we make sure we're putting it in there even though we're just using variables instead of the actual names. So we should be okay with that. So I think we're doing okay. That's our insert. So this is the one that's actually going to help us insert things from our previous file, from our index file. So everything looks okay there. I think, I don't know if I need the semicolon here or after or not. Let me check my other one. Let me check in here just to double check. Just double check the semicolon stuff. I don't think it matters that much when I do that. Let me just look at one I did before. And it looks like I took it out of there and put a semicolon at the end to make sure that statement ends with a semicolon. That's probably the smart thing to do, to make sure that one, it's always good to have a semicolon at the end with PHP, even if you had another one there. So I think I'll take that out. Because even when we're working in here, they put a semicolon there, but I think we've worked without always having that in there. Because even sometimes it doesn't require it when we do our SQL. So I'm going to leave that out of there. You could put both and try it and see what happens, but I think we're okay. It probably looks nicer without the extra one in there, but we do, because PHP is very insistent on having a semicolon, we want to make sure we have it at the end, because the one in there wouldn't mean anything. So having that in there inside the quotes isn't a big deal. So again, we just have this variable that basically means that we're inserting into it. So this will represent this whole thing, this whole kind of query that we kind of have there. And then what we have after this, I'll just kind of get a line here, or remove a line, and it says connects and runs the insert query. Now this is the actual query that's kind of doing the action here. So this is kind of this is connecting. This is the thing that's really interacting with our database. This is the query thing. And again, I put these in here so you could see them. It even has the or die thing. So we'll take a look at that. But let's look at I think I'm missing a Y in there, but it's my SQLite query. And let's just take a look at what that says in going back to the PHP stuff. And I'll go back here and look at some of these, and I'll look for my SQLite query. Here it is. It just says performs a query against a database. That's just whatever we do. That's just kind of connecting and doing this stuff. Now you won't see a lot here. All it really does is we run a query, and then you just put in the connection, and then you can basically put the select in there. See, this is showing the select and the insert into, but we already have a variable that represents that. So we're going to use a variable instead of this putting the whole insert thing in there. That's why variables kind of help. So we can, if we want to copy this, we can. And I'll copy that, and And I'll go here and I'll kind of start this off. I'll tab in and I'll paste that and I'll say my SQLite query, and I'll put the extra n there because we're using the con with two n's. Up here we're using con with two n's. So I'll make sure I'll put con with two n's, and then I don't want select and all that because we already have all this. We have this insert into. So what I'm going to put here is I just want to put insert SQL, this thing. So I'll copy this and I'll put this right over top of it. We don't need any quotes in here or anything. So it's just it's gonna connect, and then it's gonna run that variable, which is that basically that SQL query statement. So it's gonna run that in here. So that's what this does. It helps us. It connects and it runs whatever kind of statement you need to run. So this represents that, and I think we've done that before when we've just displayed things. So we're doing two things. We're inserting, and then we're actually going to display. So we got two things going on here we're going to do. So we're still going to have to display it on the page. So that's what's going to be up next. It says create a variable display that'll run the SQL select display query. So we have another thing to do. Now we're going to actually have to display it on a page. All right, one thing I forgot up here, it says something about or die, error querying database. They have something here that we could put in here, and we could put something called or die. And then after or die, we put kind of a message in here. I'll just put error message. And I'll just kind of finish. And you might say, well, how would I know that? Well, some of them that we've worked on, you might see that. But if you want to go check it out, because I recommend going to check it out. Now, this isn't the easy one to find. You almost have to go search it. But if you go into PHP, and you almost have to go down to like miscellaneous. They have miscellaneous. I think it might be under functions, but it's under miscellaneous, PHP miscellaneous. They have something called the or die one. I think you'll find it in here. Or they might just call it die. It's just called die, but we're going to use or in there. So here's die. It just says, and all this says is prints a message and exits the current script. So if we don't do something, it'll just kind of, it's almost like an error message. So it just says or die, and then you give some message, unable to connect or unable to query or whatever. So that just tells you, it's just another way that tells you that you have a problem with your query, this or die thing. So we're just going to put it after our connection. So that's what that does. Don't worry too much about it, but it's just going to put or die. So if we don't connect, if we can't run the query, something's wrong with our query, it's just going to say or die, and we'll put an error message. And we'll just say, I guess what it would say, error with the query. You can put anything you want. How about I just put query error, and then that's shorter, and it will kind of get the idea across. So query error. So at least when I see that, I'll know I have a problem. Well, obviously I won't see any things being displayed, but I'll see query error, and I'll know that, I'll even put an exclamation point. I'll know there's a problem there. So that's what or die means. It just means it'll exit. It exits the script, and it also gives a little error message. Again, this is just, I'm new to PHP too, so this is just stuff you'll just kind of pick up, and hopefully you'll see it and recognize it, and the more you do stuff, you'll it won't be foreign to you. At least you'll be familiar with it. Now, this next thing is create a variable to run the SQL select. Now, this is almost like what we did up here. This is almost the same thing. I could almost copy sort of it. I'll copy some of this here because it's almost the same thing, because this was the insert. Now we're going to kind of do the display. So I'm going to kind of make a variable, and what I'll do here is it says create a variable display SQL. So I'll call it display, just so it's kind of descriptive. Display SQL. And it's not going to be insert into, it's actually going to be select. And we've done this before. This is from our other one, select from. This is when, and we actually do like the select all from. I think it's like that. And if you're not sure, look at one of your other ones. Look at your EX5 and see how we did it then. And I think we did something like select all from country where continent. So it's something like that. So we're doing select all from characters. That's what we're going to do. And we're not putting any limitations on it. We're not filtering. We're not putting any limited queries. We're displaying everything. So we don't need any of these kind of limitations, like where something equals this or where something is less than that. We only need this part right here. So I'm going to go back to my display B, and that's all I'm going to do is just select all from characters, and I'll just kind of end it there, and I'll put a I think I just need a quote on the end. And I'll put a semicolon because, again, PHP likes having a semicolon there. So that should be select all from characters. And we're still not displaying them yet, but that's kind of gathering them up. And what we have to do still is we got to run another query. We got to run this MySQLite query again. And this time we're going to basically do this part of it. We're going to connect and we're going to run the SQLi or run this kind of display SQL to do that too. So we also have to do that, and we're going to set it up as result, and that's where it's going to finally display in a table. So we got a little bit more to do here. So I'm going to look at the comment here just to help me out, and it says create a variable named result. So whenever I see that, I know to put a $sign and start making a variable, and it says result. And we've used result before, so you might be able to look at your past files that you've worked with. And remember, with a variable, you're always saying equals. It's not like JavaScript where you say var, you just put $sign. That means it's a variable. So $sign result equals. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to run almost this kind of thing. So I'll just copy this so I don't have to type that. And I'll paste that. So that's going to equal this kind of query again. And it's going to be connection, except it's going to be display SQL because it's actually going to represent, we're going to take this thing. So this is the one that's actually going to kind of run it. So this is going to take it from the database. So this is the second part of it. So I could copy this and put it in here. So what should be happening here? And again, you know, this is confusing. This isn't something you're going to pick up immediately and just start writing your own stuff by heart. It takes a lot of looking back and forth, looking at W3 schools, looking at things on Stack Overflow. You know, the more you look at things and do them, this isn't something you're going to just pick up overnight. But, you know, I want you to kind of follow just the process of what's happening here, just so if something's wrong, you kind of know where to go and troubleshoot. You know to problem solve. You know what's supposed to be happening. You know, you may not be able to know all the code by heart, you know, but you may have to look things up or look at things you did. But you know where we're going here. You know that now we're going to display it. This, you know, this part of it basically inserts, and now whatever we insert, we want to display everything, including that insert. So it's inserting it, and then we want to display the whole list again. So we're just adding something that we didn't do in the past. In the past, we just displayed everything, but now we're inserting something first with this query, and then we're displaying it with this query. Now this part is probably the most complicated part, and that's why I kind of had some of this started for you. I don't know if I could explain this, you know, this whole fetch array, you know, exactly. Like I said, I'm new to PHP, so, you know, I'm familiar with arrays, but not necessarily what it's doing here with the result and all that kind of thing. But what is happening is this while loop means it's doing it each time there's a record. So it's displaying as many records there are. It'll keep going through and making sure it makes a new row so that it shows up nice on our page when we're done. And I kind of started this for you. So what's happening here, now that we have this set up, result equals MySQLite query, now we need to definitely put a semicolon here. And I guess you could put another or die after if you wanted to. You know, maybe that would help if you knew there was a problem with this. But I'm just going to put that in there. The connection and the display SQL, that's the first part. All backspace, so everything has the same amount of space. And now this is kind of started for you. It has the while loop, and it's setting up inside here. It's actually defining a new variable right inside here, and it's using this MySQLi fetch array. And you could look that up too and see how it works. I don't know if it's going to help you that much looking it up, if it's going to solve anything, but this is another one that you could look up. You could look up the fetch array. That would be the one that we were just looking at. The die function that was under miscellaneous. This stuff is under the MySQLi, these things here, all those kind of reference things here. So you could look up the MySQLite fetch. Yeah, there's the fetch array. Fetch is a result row as an associative or numeric array or both. And you may not be familiar with that kind of stuff. So you know, you could look at it to see what it's doing, but it probably doesn't help you much more than looking at the code we're actually doing. But what it's doing is it's going to be able to display things in a row, and that's what we want to do. So, you know, even if you don't understand it completely, you know what we're trying to do here. We're going to display it in a row. We know what this means. Echo TR means make a table row. Echo TD means make a cell. And then you can see we're just putting the row here, and you can see I have it started for you. You know what ID is? That's one of the column names. So we're going to do that first, and then, you know, this part is fairly easy. not easy, but it's repetitive. What we're going to do here is we're going to do ID, and then we could put it in the order that we want. You could put last name, or you could do first name. You know, whatever order, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we have it. We could put first name here, and for this one, we could do last name. If it doesn't look right, you could change it. That's last name. Make sure you spell everything right. And then we would have a species, I think. And we would have, now this, since we're displaying them, we are going to show all the different ones. So we are going to show city, because we want to show the city, even though they all say Bikini Bottom, we'll show city. And then the last one is going to be gender. So I'll just copy and paste that, and I'll put gender in there. So that should be all 6 of them from our original database. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that should be everything. And notice we have TR, and we have opening TD, closing TD, opening TD, and then we need a closing TR. And remember, this is all inside our table, so that's why we had to start our table. This is all happening within the table, so when it gets displayed, it displays inside a table. So I'll tab over here and just paste this last one, and this will be a closing TR tag with the slash. So that should, you know, this makes one row, and the while repeats it, so as long as there's records, it'll just display as many rows as we have. So that's what we have right now, and I'm going to take a break here so that we can kind of just focus on inserting in our next video. Hopefully we'll finish off with our part 4 video next on EX7B SpongeBob DB insert.